Sup guys, Beyond here. Today's gonna be my best attempt at trying to explain WoW's fundamental battles problem and why Blizzard will never really be appreciated no matter how well they actually tune the numbers. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you want more 9.1 content, and also if you have any hot takes, leave them in the comment section. I'll respond to all of them. Okay, so shitting on Blizzard is probably the most prominent feature of the community these days, especially over the last couple of years. One of the most common complaints is that the balance is just really bad and that there are good specs and then there are just horrible specs, right, that don't do anything. Well, there is of course some merit to it, some specs are a little bit better than others in certain areas for sure, but in general I think the whole perception is just very bad for the game because it spreads unnecessary negativity, right? Everyone hates the game for no reason. It spreads misinformation because people will buy these arguments and think that some classes are actually really bad when they're really not. But most importantly, it just gives a lot of bad players very easy excuses to not improve and just focus on something else when they're not performing up to par, right? Because just saying my class is bad and forgetting about it is so much easier than actually becoming good at your spec and pushing it to its limits. So a lot of players just resort to that, and the whole community sentiment of Blizzard's bad balancing also just fuels into that excuse, right? And it's also such a temporary solution, sooner or later you're just gonna have to realize that every class is just very bad if you play it very bad, right? There's no getting around that. So I mean, I get it too. Sometimes you just wanna let some steam out, bitch about your class's shit mobility or shit survivability or whatever it is, It's always something that your class is bad at, obviously. But if you genuinely believe that some specs are just like way better than others in terms of pure damage or something like that, you're just delusional, right? Of course, some specs are always going to do more single target, some are going to do more AoE, but in general, the balance is very good. I did make another video, you can check it out up here somewhere maybe, if you want to see that. If the balance is really good then, as I say it is, then where does this sentiment that Blizzard can't balance and this like weird community thing come from, right? And for that, we're gonna have to go to the famous old paint graph, guys. Bear with me here. We have work plotted against accomplishments, and you can see the work increases very exponentially here the more you want to do in the game. For the Mythic World First guys, they are just putting in an obscene amount of effort compared to the rest of the player base, obviously. I just put some general benchmarks there, know your class. You don't really need to know your class that well to clear normal, even heroic, You start to get in some more class territory there. Maybe you need to push it a little bit, but still, playing your class at a 70% effectiveness is more than enough for clearing heroic. When you get into the mythic clears, the mythic pushes maybe the first weeks, then sure, you're gonna have to push your class a bit more. You're gonna have to research some raid strats. You're gonna have to know more about the game, put some more effort in, obviously, get better gear, etc. But it's still like nowhere near this insane Echo level here. Echo and Nathria had some people playing 9 different alts of the same class. 9 mages doing all the gearing, all the mythic plus, the PvP boosts, just to see who does get the best gear and who is worth bringing into those raid runs to get more gear, right? So there were just a ton of alts. They do split runs where they're basically splitting up their raid into multiple different heroic groups so that they can just funnel loot onto all the people that they want to be more geared going into Mythic World First. Because, and this might sound like degeneracy, well, first of all, why wouldn't they do it if they could? And second of all, the Mythic World First skills are still going into the tier like at a much more appropriate gear level than the rest of the community, right? When people are complaining that or Echo is gearing so quickly with all his split runs, well, they're still gearing much more slowly than us because we're entering Mythic at like week 4, week 3, and we're already like 220, 225 when we clear Mythic. So it's very, very disingenuous, I think, to say that this is broken or OP. It's really not. Limit and method still clear the raid or Limit and Echo still clear the raid at, you know, much lower item levels than we do. Anyway, my point here is that the more work and effort you put in, the more important the balance becomes, right? Let's say you're a Limit raider, right? Your skill is at a 99 already. You've pushed yourself to almost the maximum of your class effectiveness. Your effort is at a 99, you know, you did all the split runs, you geared super efficiently, you boosted 2400 PvP, you basically did everything you could to clear this raid. And then you play a Survival Hunter. Let's say a Survival Hunter is performing at a 96% effectiveness. Why would you? Why would you be performing at a 96% effectiveness when you could be performing at a 99% effectiveness? And since your skill and effort is already at 99, well, then you're actually going to reach this 99 potential here as well on the balance. While as for the casual player, maybe your skill is at a 30, you know? Maybe your effort is at a 20. Well, if you're playing a Survival Hunter at a 96% effectiveness, then that's nowhere near as big of a difference for this player, since his skill and effort is so much lower, right? If this player wanted to improve his damage, then pushing his skill to 60 and his effort to 40 would be such a massive improvement compared to switching class to something that performs at like a 98, you know? So this is really the problem. The top end can't afford to play those subpar specs. They really need to go for those very, very small gains, the 0.1% DPS gains, in order to do what they set out to do, in order to complete all these things that they, you know, did tons of split runs, tons of gearing to be able to do. While as the general community, they would be much better off, instead of switching specs, they would be much better off just getting better at the game, improving at their class, maybe learning how to do damage, you know? And this is also the entire crux of the problem, right? If we go back to the Limit Raider here at a 99 in skill, 99 in effort, and we say that Blizzard was a god tier company, you know, Blizzard hired a ton of developers, they just spent so much money trying to get the balance down, you know, the community is always complaining about the balance. Let's fucking do it, guys. Let's actually for once balance the game very well. And they just luck out insanely hard, and they managed to get a patch where, let's say, the worst spec is at a 98.9 in terms of balance, right? That's the worst spec in the game. They're balanced immaculately. There's obviously still going to be some minuscule differences no matter how well you do it, right? Well, Limit would still not give a fuck, right? Limit would still go for the 99 specs, because why wouldn't they? It's the same problem all over again, just at a smaller scale, right? And this is really what tilts me, because in reality, the balance is already at such a small scale. The differences are very tiny. It's just that for the top end, it will never matter how tiny those differences are. While as for the general community, it doesn't really matter if one spec is 1% ahead of the other if you don't play to its full potential. So if the balance really is that tight, and if this is the crux of the problem, then why is the situation as it is, right? Why does the community bitch so much about the balance? Well, because people watch the top end and they copy what the top end does, no matter how relevant it really is for them, right? If they see Limit playing 5 Warlocks, they're gonna assume that Warlock is the best damage. When in reality, it might just be that Warlock is very tanky for a specific fight. Warlock has a good damage profile for a fight. Warlock can survive a specific element of the fight. They need many Warlock portals. Maybe they need gateways. I don't know. Like, you see what I'm saying here? There's not always as simple as it seems. So, because of all this, there will always be a best class, right? There's no getting away from it. No matter how well Blizzard tuned, there's always something that's better. And Blizzard is obviously aware of it. I'm not trying to tell Blizzard this, like they've been struggling with this for years. Well, how do they actually fix it? There's a couple of different solutions, and there's obviously a ton of solutions that I haven't thought about, but we can take a look at some that Blizzard have already tried, right? They've tried class buffs, and this is probably one of the first things they did in vanilla as well. You know, if a class just brings 5% damage by itself, no matter how well you play it, then obviously bringing one of that spec and one of every other spec that does the same thing for maybe for a different kind of damage or whatever. You know, we have the 5% magic damage, we have the 5% AP, the intellect, the spirit, or the power of fortitude, you know, all of those kinds of buffs. They just make it so that instead of bringing the spec that's 1% ahead on damage, you can bring one of each spec and be ahead on damage because of it, because all of these specs just provide passive damage to the group. So class buffs is like, it's obviously an effective solution, I can't deny that. Like, it does dilute the raid comps into more of an even split between all the classes. The problem is it really limits the top end in terms of creativity. You know, Limit can't really put together a very fun raid comp with like 13 priests if they wanted to, because they do definitely need to bring all these class buffs just for passive damage. So it definitely sucks for them. And it also just makes the game a bit more boring and generic, in my opinion. It's never fun to be brought for a class buff, you know. But as I said, it does actually help the lower end of the player base somewhat. It does help those poor rogues that are maybe... Rogue was a terrible example because it doesn't have a class buff. It does help those poor, you know, Windwalker monks who were trash for 4 tiers, but they did have that 5% physical, so they're actually going to be brought regardless. So another thing Blizzard tried in Shadowlands actually is damage niches, right? You can have a spec that's really good at single target. Maybe you have some specs that are really good at AoE. Maybe you have some specs that are good at 2 target cleave. Maybe some that are good at 3 target cleave. Some that are good at 8 targets. Some that are good at uncapped. You know, whatever it is, the intention there is probably to make it so that depending on the situation in game, you bring a different class. It doesn't really matter if one class is 1% ahead on something. If all the classes have somewhere to shine, then you're always going to bring all of them. Well, the problem with this is, right, that it just doesn't work out in practice, because there's not a lot of different scenarios in the actual game, right? In a raid, the most important thing is mostly going to be single target damage. Let's face it. And even if there's a ton of AoE, maybe you just bring some single target classes that can also do AoE, and you don't really bring those AoE classes that are actually designed to do that kind of job, right? So the target cap, while a noble idea in practice, I think, or noble idea in theory, it doesn't really work out in practice because there's just not enough different scenarios in the game to warrant bringing these classes, especially not at the top end, right? In a mythic progression fight, there's just not going to be enough different scenarios to bring different specs depending on if they're target capped or not, right? Something that Blizzard also has done over the years, and something that I personally like really well, is just to YOLO it, you know? Just YOLO it, balance well, because Blizzard are balancing well, right? They have balanced well, and just tell the community, you know, it is really balanced. And I think this would work if the community just latched onto the idea that the classes are balanced very well. It really only matters how well you play it for most of the community, and Blizzard can balance the classes. I think YOLOing it would work pretty well, and right now, you know, classes are hard enough, classes are difficult enough to warrant just bringing your best players for pretty much every scenario, right? If you're below, let's say we have a line here, somewhere around here, right? You're not a Mythic World First Raider, but you're somewhere on this end of the spectrum, you know, maybe you're clearing Mythic, maybe you're clearing Heroic and then stopping, maybe you're dabbling a little bit into Mythic, maybe you're just a normal Raider, I don't know. Whoever you are on this side of the spectrum, playing what you're best at and bringing your best players are always going to be the best move here. It's just, the balance difference is not big enough to warrant bringing anything but your best players under this red line here. And even on this side of the line, bringing your best players could be a good idea in a lot of scenarios. It's just when a scenario arises where you really need to squeeze out that 1% extra damage, then if you're already putting in this huge amount of work, this huge amount of effort, then bringing the best class is going to be definitely be important. So all in all, my point here is that if the community would actually just come to terms with the reality, realize that bringing your best players is best, becoming better at your spec or becoming better at the game in general is a way more effective way to improve than to switch class or switch spec, then I think WoW would be a better place and the community would be more friendly to interact with. Well, this was a pretty rambly video. Did go on for quite a while. I hope I got my point across. And I hope you guys have fun in 9.1, and I'll see you in the next one.